you've laid out this theory that's been out there now for a while that something happened, some mechanical catastrophe. Everyone on the plane basically is unconscious or dead, and the plane keeps on flying. Based on this new information, the altitude going up, going down, you still stand by that theory?
Well, I think it seems to support the theory. I mean, it is only a theory. We don't have anything, any quality information to support it, but it is a viable theory. And I think that the important thing here is to not get confused by terms. Explosion, fire, those two things, decompression, they're all candidates for what might have overtaken this plane. But there's also another one, which is gas, which is not much discussed, and the kind of gas that is given off by the lithium-ion batteries. That we now know that there were 444 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo hold at the time, and these batteries behave in a very strange way. In the case of the Boeing 787 lithium batteries, Boeing were very insistent on saying that they were not technically fires. They were not technically combustion. These batteries released fumes and gases. So I think of the options possible here, which could have disabled the plane, or at least disabled the pilots and knocked out the passengers, this is a serious one. I would urge us to look at not just the top half of the plane, but the bottom half of the plane, the belly, the architecture of the belly, what's in the belly, the cargo holds, and the electronics bay, which is next to the forward cargo hold. The architecture in there, what the wiring was, because we have to explain one thing. If this plane, as it now seems, got all the way down into the South Pacific by some means or other, whether flown by human hand or flying itself, we have to understand how that was possible after whatever was the emergency did compromise the plane in some way. This is the puzzle. This aircraft was probably compromised in some way, and yet it wasn't made impossible for it to continue, and it's pinning down that point that we need to do.
Let me ask Mark Weiss, who's a 777 pilot. Mark, what do you think? Is that a reasonable assumption that Clive Irving has made?
Well, I can understand where it's coming from, but I don't think that that's going to be a case in reality. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. Number one, because of the suppression systems that would have been in the belly of the aircraft. If you had any gas or anything that would have caused a temperature increase, you would have gotten a warning, first of all, in the cockpit. But the other thing that I question is there's a pressure differential in the cockpit of the 777 as opposed to the cabin, which is actually built in so that the air, if there's a fire in the cabin, you're not going to be able to allow that to creep into the cockpit. So I kind of discount that theory.
If the plane is, Clive, on autopilot, can it shift altitudes, go up to 45,000, down to 20,000, back up to 35,000, go down to 12,000, go back up to 35,000, fly another 6 hours? Does that make sense?
Well, I think Mark made an important point about this yesterday, that he said that if it had gone down to 12,000 altitude, which your story and your reporting has said it did, at one point at least, and if it continued on for the rest of the flight at that altitude, it would have swallowed much more gas than if it had been cruising at 30,000 feet, which means that it wouldn't have gone as far as we're assuming it went if it was cruising at 30,000 feet. And they have said, the Inmarsat people have said that they don't have accurate information on the altitude of the plane.
Well, what do you, can a plane on autopilot, though, shift altitude, Mark?
No, really what you're doing is, if you think about, break down the term autopilot, it's staying where you put it.
Well, so the point being that if it goes down to 12,000 as it goes over the Malay Peninsula, or just a little bit further, there's no way it would have reached that area all the way in the southern Indian Ocean where everybody is looking for it right now, wouldn't have had enough fuel.
If you're making the assumption that that 12,000-foot altitude is in fact correct. But certainly, had it gone down to 12,000 feet, as Clive just said, it's not going to have that same range capability it would have had it been at altitude.
So you're questioning whether it actually went down.
Absolutely.
You're under the assumption it stayed at 35,000. Clive, is that your assumption as well?
Yeah, that's my assumption too, that it stayed at 35. Because I think the Inmarsat people, as you were saying earlier, Wolf, these people have more information than they're actually telling us, I think, because the commitment of this search to that one area, this enormous commitment of assets to this one area, which supports this whole idea that it was there and that the Northern Arc has been dispensed with, that shows you that there was such a level of certainty and assurance that this was the right place to go. in a way that when you question those guys from the satellite company today, and they were hedging a bit on it, I still think that no one would have committed this number of resources to research that one area unless they had more certainty than that.
Yeah, I assume they know more than they're letting on as well.
Yeah.
Very quickly to you, Mark, if in fact there had been fire or gas or something in the cargo hold from the lithium batteries or whatever reason, it would not have taken, one of the first things you could do is send some sort of message to ground control. We got an SOS, we got a major problem here.
Well, the first thing you're going to do is fight the fire. Procedurally, you're going to fight the fire. But then the next thing you're going to do, fire is probably one of the most frightening things you can have in an airplane. So you're going to certainly make sure that you've declared an emergency and let somebody know about
You're
it.
still working in the assumption that a person was responsible for this, not mechanical failure.
I still have that feeling.
And Clive, you think it was a mechanical failure?
Yes, I think it was a technical failure.
All right, good. Well, there's going to be a lot of analysis, and we'll have both of you back to discuss. I appreciate it.